In this little video, I'm just going to take you through and have a look at a Pro Tools session and discuss possible ways that we can document our sound edit. Now, with regards to documenting our sound edit, why do we need to document it, or when or why, where would we do such a thing? Well, let's just have a look at the music hands-on project. So what I've got in front of me here is a completed music project from the Pro Tools 101 book. So we'll have a look and a quick listen to that and see what that sounds like, and then we'll have a chat about it.
Waiting out in the parking lot after you get off your shift. James forgot to pick you up. Now you're asking me for a lift. Looks like everyone is gone. How long? I've wanted to get you alone. Now I'm taking you home. All that is wrong could be right. I've waited too long, and I'm driving you home tonight. The wheels are spinning round and round, hard against the pavement below. You're the only beautiful thing in this town. Somehow I gotta let you know. Looks like now or never's here to stay. Sending you my way now, taking you home. All that is wrong could be right. I've waited too long to tell you what's on my mind. Turning to stone, my lips feel like lead inside. But you're talking on the phone, and I'm driving you home tonight.
Okay, so there's our Pro Tools session and our completed music project, which hopefully you're familiar with because you've completed your music project, or if you haven't yet, then you're about to. Now, we're really lucky with Pro Tools and current digital audio workstations that we get great graphic displays showing us exactly what's going on with our tracks, our track lists, our edits, our in and out points, and all of that sort of thing. In this case, we've also documented within Pro Tools through the use of markers. So we can see our markers up here, verse 1, verse 2, chorus 2, and break. So we can easily navigate to the start of those sections of the song. And we can also see visually down what our instrumentation is in our arrangement for those sections of the song. So that's really convenient. And if people are just working on their own, then that's probably plenty of information to go with, to work through. But we're just going to talk about some other possibilities for documentation now. So just as by way of an example, I'm going to have a look at a post-production audio example, and I'm going to flick over to an image on the web of a cue sheet for a mix cue sheet this is from Apocalypse Now. So Walter Murch was the sound editor, sound designer on Apocalypse Now, and this is a reproduction of that from a book called The Conversations, Walter Murch and the Art of Editing Film from 2002. And this is a reproduction of his mix cue sheets. So this area here represents a track in time, track, etc., going in time. And we're also working with, well, actually we've got stationary locations, stereo panning locations, quad panning locations as well. So there's panning instructions as we go through these different elements. We've also showing the in and the out points of our sounds. We're keeping in mind that this is from Apocalypse Now was the late 70s. So we didn't have Pro Tools then. We didn't have a nice graphical user display. We're working on probably on MAG or reel-to-reel type um, magnetic recording materials or sprocketed film, and they didn't have the nice visual displays. So keeping a track of your cue sheets was really important so that you knew what was coming up. And in this case, the sound designer Walter Murch had a clear plan for how it was going to be mixed. This is at center, hard, and then it goes to left, and then it pans to right, and then left back, right back. So this is for basically instructions for someone to get on the panning knob and change that as we go through the mix. We've also got some other controls here. So if you see here, this sort of symbol is representing a fade in effectively and a fade out at this point, depending on what's going on. This is our pan line, navigating across a big whoosh from left to right, a ping from the center roughly to the left. And then because it was a surround sound, we've got quad panning controls as well. So that's pretty interesting. If we go down a little bit further, we've actually got effects tracks outlined here. So we've got helicopter, medium fade in, 2 lines, and crossfade into interior of a helicopter, back to exterior of a helicopter, a crossfade, a short crossfade there. We've got start footage. That's more of a hard cut here. This is an extra long fade in and long fade out at this point. So these are all mixing cue sheets that were used in for Apocalypse Now. Very real examples. So that's a great way of documenting our sound. Like I mentioned, we're very lucky today that we have great visual representation of what's going on in Pro Tools, and we can edit and do lots of mixing and all these things directly in. So you may or may not need to document to the same degree. Another example, just if I scroll further down, this link is in eLearn as well to this website. This is for a song visualization. So this came out of a question posted on this forum or board about a band's going to record in the studio, and they thought it might be useful to be able to visualize what's going on in their song in terms of arrangements to give to the engineer or producer so that they can work through things. And that's a really, really great, well-planned way of doing things. So in this case, the screen resolution might not be great for you, but we have just the drum intro here, which is this lighter, kind of yellowy, almost greeny color. Then the guitars enter at this point. This is the orange here, and we've also got a second guitar, which is this redder color here. We've also got the bass in the brown in the middle represented here. So then we've got those elements, and we've also got a representation here of dynamics by the size of our blocks, I guess, as we go through this. So that's a really cool example. And it sort of outlines that a little bit further here. It's basically changing from our guitars to dancey drums and distorted guitars in here, and then back to whatever it is there. So that's one example. Here's a different example of a track sheet. So this might be for if you're working on an 8-channel track, like a reel-to-reel tape machine. You've got 8 tracks in this case, or 8 tracks outlined. So this is an example of your track list and how you might plan it. So verse 1, we have these elements, into chorus, these elements, and you may or may not have everything going at once. So you're back to guitar in here. So that's just as an example of the sorts of things, the sorts of documentation that you might have in terms of planning, either for recording or mixing possibilities. If we go back into Pro Tools, we've got these nice markers, which is great. So if we need to add markers, like say for instance for drum start, I could tab into my drum start here, tab into my actual transient that kicks that off, and we can add a new marker, hit our little plus to add a marker or memory location, and we can add a new marker for drum start if we want to. So markers are really useful for that sort of thing. Now, what I'll show you is how we can then export some of this information for use for documentation if we need to. So let's start off with our markers as our first way of doing things. So we've got our markers ruler showing. I've got my session and I'm going to export. So file menu, export session info as text. So there's a number of cool handy things in here. Now for this first example, we'll just look at markers. So tick include markers, untick these other things. Okay, and we're going to export essentially a markers list. Okay, now the time format here, we're working in bars and beats for this music project, so we'll stick with bars and beats. If it was a post-production project, we'd probably go to time code. If we weren't working to bars and beats or a click track, then we'd probably just go for real-time minutes and seconds. Let's go with bars and beats. And we're going to export as just a text document. And okay. So for convenience, I'll just pop that on the desktop now, and I'll call it markers list. Okay, and I can navigate around to my desktop, and here's my markers list that was saved on my desktop. And this is what we get. So this is my session info as text that's been exported for my markers. So it includes information about my project name, sample rate, bit depth, etc. Time code stuff. And then it's got my markers listing. So the location of the marker, what unit that's based in, and in this case, the name of the marker. If I have comments associated with the marker, they would also be brought back with it. So if I go back to Pro Tools, if I want to add comment to a marker, I open up the comment, I can double click on it, and I can add a comment in here. If I do add comments, then they're brought back to this point. So other examples, if we're sending something off to mix, and we want to put drum start, one of the things that we could put is slow fade in for this. Let's say we're sending our session onto a mix engineer and we haven't done all of the edit stuff, then that's one way that we could do it. We could pass them their notes, essentially. We could export this stuff. The thing about Pro Tools is, assuming that you know how to work it, we can simply do the fades ourselves and lock it in. So Command F, I'm going to change to just a more standard kind of shape. And so then effectively I've kind of documented it by doing it. I'll check that fade and see if I like it.
Me for a lift. Looks like everyone is gone. How long? I've wanted to get you alone now. Take it.
Now that's interesting. I'm not sure if I'm sold on that as a fade in because I feel like I missed that kind of the impact of that first hit. But just as by way of example, I'm going to leave that as because essentially we're documenting that fade by having that fade in there. So that's pretty cool. So that's just using markers and then file export session info as text with our markers. Now some other ways that we might want to do things includes I'm just going to add a new track and I'm going to add a mono audio track for this example. In this example, I'm going to do a thing called clip groups. Now, clip groups are pretty cool. I use these a bit for my own work, for marking out things when I'm spotting things like, so if I'm doing a Foley or a sound effects session, those sorts of things. And so I might mark this out as, say, Foley guide. In this case, it's a music track, so I'm not really going to do Foley, but just by way of example, let's say in this section I have footsteps of some sort. So I can go, okay, I want to make a new clip group, and let's say footsteps, and let's say high heels on, let's say cement or concrete. So that's just typed that into the title of the clip. It's a clip group, so I'm not making any new audio per se. And that's documented in there. So this is a good guide. So here I might have some other Foley cue. Maybe it's just a smaller section long group. I'm going to call this one, what's this? Slap in face. Okay, so that sounds like a fun Foley cue to try and do. So there we go. We've got a guide for what's going on. So this is another way that we can effectively put notes in our session. It could be for us, it could be for other people. If I want to export that, I can select my track, go File, Export, Session Info as track, as text, sorry. And this time I've already done the markers, so I'm cool with that, that's fine. I've got various other options in here though. File list, clip list, plugin list. This time I want to include track EDLs. Now, EDLs stands for Edit Decision Lists. This is a very common thing, very common, mainly for video editors from that side of things, so for post-production tasks. But what essentially an edit decision list is, it will show all of our details of what's on a track in that sequence. So in this case, I'm going to go for selected tracks only, because I want to actually, no, let's just go for all tracks, and then we can have a look at the whole lot. And just because I can, I'm going to change it up to time code for this example rather than bars and beats. So export, and I'll put that again on the desktop, and I'll call this the EDL. Okay, so navigate across is my EDL. Alright, and this is what it looks like. Now that's quite a long queue, so it's kind of pushed things out of line a little bit, but same sort of deal. Shows my info about my session at the top here, so you can see that that info is the same there. But instead of markers listing, as I had previously, now I've got track listing. So it shows each of my tracks. So in this case, this is my Foley guide track, Fol guide. And it shows each of my events or edits or clips that I have on that particular track. So footsteps, high heels and cement, and it starts at that time code, ends at that time code, so it's a whole 3 seconds and 29 frames long. Slap in Face is my next event. So this is a good way that I can basically write out a list. I can print it out, and then I've got a printed reference if I want to, or I could send that to someone and share it with them. You'll also see here on our, or further down the track, we've got drums, including, it includes notes on my fade in, and then drum mix left, drum mix right. Okay, so this is a really great, very simple way to document exactly what's going on with your clips on your tracks, on your main playlists, and at what time. Effectively, this is a whole, what we might consider a track list or a cue sheet of sorts. It's an edit decision list, effectively. As I mentioned, these sorts of edit decision lists are very common to get from video editors if you're doing post-production sound edits. The format may be slightly different. Now what I'll do, I might call it at that for this video, but I'm going to start a new video in just a moment, picking up from where we left off, so that you can have a look at what we might want to do with this sort of information next.